want to do a full-on interview, which is fine.
Okay, yeah. And if you have to go, I'll definitely let you go at whatever time you need to get going, because I understand that you're a very busy man.
I can give you about 20, 30 minutes.
Okay, perfect. And thank you so much. I totally appreciate this too.
Yeah, no problem. My pleasure. So, is this going to be a question and answer format?
Yeah, I have a couple of them lined up here, and I'm going to start off with my main concern, which is, even though with the legalization of both hemp and marijuana for medical and recreational use has opened up the door for industrial hemp use and advancement, do you think that the stigma is being harder to be broken because of the cannabis industry, or do you think it's just the opposite?
Yeah, well, remember, I've been in this since 1990, so 34 years, and the knowledge people have on industrial hemp is much more now than it was back then. The stigma, just because marijuana was illegal, in 1990 there was no medical and certainly no recreational in that year. So going back then, you try to talk about industrial hemp, and people would look at you and they're like, oh, well, you just want to legalize marijuana, right? And we're like, no, it's industrial. So, since that time, medical marijuana has been legalized in the majority of states, and recreational marijuana is, I think, fully legal in at least half of the states right now, if not a little bit more. So, just, the stigma of marijuana being something only druggies do or something like that, marijuana's become a lot more mainstream, companies and everything. The problem that we have is that because there was a stigma and fear of marijuana, they put overly restrictive laws in place that have made it more difficult to do just the industrial part of it, because, I like to say they treat marijuana like radioactive candy that's irresistible to children.
Right. That's so true.
And so, an example of this is they still have the 0.3% THC barrier, which is too low. No one smokes 0.3% marijuana. However, they made it where there's so much regulation in doing regular marijuana that people who do that sort of thing found, well, gee, we can just grow industrial hemp and extract that 0.2% THC that's in it and sell it that way. So they do have to, what I would say, make it easier and more normal for the marijuana industry, and certainly get rid of a lot of these regulations as it would apply to fiber and grain. That 0.3 should be raised to 1%. If they do that, we're not going to have a problem with it. The other thing is, currently, if you want to grow industrial hemp, you have to do a criminal background check. And, a lot of farmers don't want to have to go through that when they do it. Also, they require, testing of the crop. And, that's a hassle as well. It's expensive. So, what they should have is completely separate grain and fiber from, cannabinoids, which would be CBD and marijuana, and then treat the grain and fiber as a regular crop. If they suspect somebody is, growing it illicitly, i.e. claiming that it's industrial hemp, but they're really growing marijuana, we already have laws in place that would take care of that. But they should just let the grain and the fiber crops just be like regular crops.
I have to agree.
As long as it's low THC, should not even have to be tested. You're just like, well, we're growing it for fiber. When you grow for fiber, you harvest it before there's any flowers. When you grow for grain, you harvest it after the flowers. So flowers don't really play a part in it, and they should just leave people alone.
I agree on that, and I see that that could be a very big issue for the industry for sure.
Correct. Exactly. So it's made it, you'll talk to a farmer and they're like, well, I'd like to grow industrial hemp. They're like, okay, but you got to get a background check. You got to pay for the government to come on out and test your field. And then there's always the risk, oh my God, if I go hot, over the 0.3, they're like, oh, you need to destroy your whole crop. You can't even remediate it. Things like that make it difficult, but they're all unnecessary.
I have to agree because I can't see where it would matter if it even had 3% THC in it if you're using it for fibers, because you're not even trying to extract the THC or anything. You're not.
Yeah, exactly. Because with fiber, you're harvesting prior to any flowers.
Okay, so at this point, would it be advisable for like a new person that doesn't even say own property but they plan on buying property just to grow industrial hemp? Would that be advisable for that person, or?
I would say this is what I recommend. If I get these calls, hi, I'm a farmer, I want to get into hemp, and I'm like, well, what do you want to do? Oh, I want to build houses out of hemp. And I'm like, okay, well, remember there's a big difference between just growing the hemp and building a hemp house out of hempcrete.
Right.
There's a number of steps in between. If you're a farmer, first you got to learn how to grow hemp, and I recommend that, hey, year one, don't grow a lot, don't bet your farm, grow a little bit, maybe 1 acre, 5 or 10 acres, so you get an idea of what you're doing.
Gotcha.
At that time. Then maybe if you do it right, then maybe year 2 or 3, you can start, expanding and growing a lot more of it. Then you're going to be doing it right at that time. Then also, growing is one thing, but you still have to extract fiber out of it, which is decortication. So, the conventional way of having it done is you need a decortication facility. So if you're growing hemp, you better have a decortication facility nearby. Otherwise, you're stuck with the hemp straw. You won't be able to do anything with it because it's too expensive to try to ship it across the country.
Gotcha. And the decortication, what is that process like?
All right, so decortication is just separating the basic fiber from the core fiber. If you want, I just posted a video 2 days ago on that, and if you go to our Hemp Traders YouTube page, so YouTube, then you type Hemp Traders, we have a video that says the hemp fiber industry, everything you need to know, and that shows in detail everything it has to do to growing the hemp, harvesting it, decorticating it, and things like that. So decortication, the current method of what's done is the farmer grows it, they chop it down, they let it rest in the field, then they bale it up, and then those bales are taken to a decortication facility where it goes through a series of rollers and hammer mills and things that mash it down, where they then begin to separate the bark from the core. Because together it's not worth anything. You have to have it separated in order to have value.
Gotcha. And that makes perfect sense too, because like you said, each part is used for a different product, so. Okay, and then here's a huge one it's on everybody's mind, and it's biofuel. And I know that you're doing a lot of research on biofuel, and they claim that the process.
I personally, I haven't done any research on biofuel.
Oh, okay.
Okay, now, when we're talking about biofuel, you have a couple of different. I can tell a little bit about it of what I know. So, one biofuel is you could grow it for seed, press the seed, you get the hemp seed oil, and that could be used as a substitute in the diesel engine.
Okay.
All right. Another method is you can grow whole hemp stalk, and that would be chopped down, and then there's a process called pyrolysis where you heat it up, and you can get of those, all three I do not think are really going to ever be a thing, because the demands that we have for fuel are so high that you just couldn't grow enough hemp to satisfy it. Hemp has value in other areas. However, there is one area you can grow it, get the herd, turn the herd, or even possibly whole stalk into pellets, and those pellets could be used to burn, to possibly, for heat or for a stove or something like that in areas of the world where they don't have a lot of wood.
Gotcha.
Right, but it wouldn't really be a fuel, not in the way we think of fuel. Like it won't drive a car or anything like that.
Okay.
Meaning you don't chop down wood and throw it in an automobile to power your automobile. That would hark back to something like a steam engine. We don't run cars on steam engines.
Right. That's definitely not economically viable.
Yeah, it would also be very dirty. There'd be a lot of smoke.
Yes, for sure. And then you guys used to make hemp paper.
We weren't personally making it, but I've had hemp paper made. In the case of what we were doing, we had it made in India, and then it was shipped over here, and we were selling it. And you can definitely make paper out of hemp. The limitations are with that is basically economy of scale. Hemp, or I should say paper in general, if you were to visit a modern paper making facility, they are enormous. They are huge. They take up multiple square blocks, and they operate in a way where they have to be operating 24/7, 365 days a year, and they need to run at 97% efficiency or more, otherwise they're losing money.
Gotcha.
And as I've talked to paper people, and they've said, yes, we can switch to hemp, but we're not going to do it because there's not enough hemp around right now. We need, literally, they'll have an area near the paper mill where they bring wood, wood products. They say they have over a month's or 2 months worth of raw material, because they said we can never run out of raw material. If we run out, we're out of business. So there needs to be a lot of hemp available.
So we need more hemp
there.
farmers with easier regulations.
Right, yeah. What would probably happen is they could start by creating paper that was maybe 90% wood and then 10% hemp. And that would probably work. And then as more and more hemp gets grown and it's more available, they can start changing that percentage to where you have more hemp, and hopefully maybe 100% hemp in one day. You can make all these things. You can make tissues out of it. You can make wipes out of it. You can make rolling papers. All different sorts of paper can all be made from hemp. But it's really a matter of cost and the availability of the raw materials. So the hemp has to be as cheap as wood, and it has to be as available as wood.
Right. That makes sense. And right now it's not being grown for industrial uses in the United States very much. Not near as much as it is for cannabis.
This year, I think there's only going to be about 20 to 30,000 acres or 20 to 40,000 acres of hemp grown for fiber this year, which is very little.
Yeah, compared to what we have for farmland, that's not very much hemp at all.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So, but it's okay. This is, as soon as we begin to show that you can make money off of it, they can, within 1 year, you have a lot more people growing hemp.
This is true.
If you followed the CBD industry during the 2010s, it went from practically nothing in 2011, 2012. The height was probably 2019. Or 2020 when it skyrocketed. There was a whole bunch, but unfortunately you don't need a lot of acres grown for CBD to have enough CBD to give to everyone
See, I think we already have plenty of growers for CBD and whatever else they want to do with the medical usage and recreational usage. If I was going to get into growing hemp, I would want to do it on the fiber level.
I'm sorry, repeat that last one.
I said if I was going to get into growing hemp, I would want to get in on the fiber level where I'm providing to the industry.
We're going to need a lot more. Let me put it another way. The entry level, it was a lot easier to grow hemp for CBD than it is for grain. And grain is a lot easier to grow than for fiber because you need, each of the ones you need to grow more acres and have more infrastructure involved to really let it take off.
Okay, that's interesting. That it's actually easier to get in on the CBD level than the industrial level.
Yeah, well, think about this, okay? Let's say you grew a marijuana and or CBD plant. Basically, you're growing up for the flower. You could grow one plant in your backyard, and let's just assume you could get about 1 pound of marijuana or CBD flower off of that plant. That's going to last you, one plant could last one person a full year.
Very true.
You know, I don't know if you've ever smoked marijuana, but you think, when you buy it, you buy it by, an eighth of an ounce, a quarter of an ounce, or a pound is 16 ounces right there.
Right.
And even the heaviest smoker, that's going to take them a long time to be able to go through that. So you could potentially grow a few plants in your backyard, go to your kitchen, and subtract the cannabinoids, put it in a bottle, and you're in business. Right there, you have a tincture of CBD. Whereas if you're growing it for grain, you probably have to grow at least 50 acres for it to be feasible, for it to work.
Gotcha.
50 acres for it to be feasible.
That makes sense too, because you want to have a lot.
Fiber, you're probably going to want to do at least about 500 acres. There's a decortication facility. It's going to need a lot more than that to keep it operating year round.
Gotcha. And how much does it cost to get a decortication center started?
Oh, it's expensive. It's in the millions of dollars. So a little one might be $1 to $3 million. A medium one would maybe be, 5 to 10 million, and then a really large one. And it was for example, that just opened up in a company called Panda in Texas. That's probably around $50 million investment.
Ooh, wow. That is expensive to get into. So
yes,
you would definitely want to have your networking set up before you even entered into it.
Right. So, somebody wants to get into fiber hemp, I would say, hey, you got to be near one of these facilities.
Gotcha. And how many decortication facilities do we have in the United States currently?
I would say, they more and more have been popping up. I'd say this season, my guess is there's probably going to be about 10 to 12.
Okay, so that gives
around the country, yeah, which is not a lot.
No, it's definitely
in
not.
In reality, you'd want to have the hemp grown within about 50 miles of the facility, not much farther.
Right, because otherwise the transportation to get it decorticated and then get your product returned is going to be costly. Okay, that makes sense. And have you found any issues with the decortication, or have there been any advancements?
Yeah, good question. All right, so current decortication facilities are expensive, and I consider them inefficient, and they create, the fiber created from it is inferior. All of those decortication plants that are out there right now can't even produce fiber that would be what I would say textile grade. So it could only be fiber for non-woven uses, for insulation, composites,
Okay.
With it. What we have to do, and this is something I'm working on, is a new method of harvesting and decortication where it can be done on the farm, where with the equipment it can both harvest and decorticate all at the same time.
Oh, that would be very interesting.
Yeah, it's referred to as green decortication.
Okay. And where are you on that process?
Solves a lot of problems.
How far along are you on that process?
Well, we're definitely moving along, I'll say that.
Well, shoot, I think that pretty much answers all of my questions that I had.
That's it?
Let's see. Oh, here's another one. How hard is it to get other industries aside from just the paper industry, like other clothing manufacturers and fiber makers, to make the transition?
The biggest obstacle that we've had to hemp has been price and availability of it. I don't see, when you talk to people in industry, it's rare that you get somebody's like, oh, it's marijuana, we don't want to touch it. They're more practical with their apprehension of it. So they're more like, okay, will this fiber work with what we're currently using? So they're looking at the hemp fiber to be a substitute for what they're currently using. So they're going to say, okay, does the fiber have the characteristics that it can substitute for what we're using? And then two, what's the price? Is this fiber cheaper than what we're using? Is it the same price? Is it a little bit more or a lot more? And where the demand, part of it comes from people are trying to look for more biodegradable and natural options for what they're doing,
right?
Just for the environmental purposes. So let's say somebody is using fiberglass for their application, and hemp comes along and it works, but then they're like, okay, we can, we're willing to pay a little bit more for your hemp, but probably no more than maybe 10, 15, 20% more than what we're currently paying. If it's beyond that, it just makes our product too expensive to operate. If it's the same price, then they probably be like, oh, well, there's benefits here. If you can make it the same, we might as well switch. You might as well use it. On the other hand, if it's less expensive, then they're going to want to switch right away, because then it's like a win-win situation for them. They're like, oh my God, not only can we be more environmental and biodegradable, but we're going to be able to make our product for less.
Right.
With it. So, and that goes with just about every industry with hemp. Hemp, like my main business has always been in the textile industry, and hemp is very, very similar to actually flax linen, and there's a direct substitution right there. Hemp looks and feels and behaves so much like linen that you can just substitute one for the other. So then they're like, okay, well, what is the cost? And they're like, okay, if we can get hemp for a little bit less than linen, then bam, they're going to use it. So far, because there's been so little hemp grown in the world compared to linen and cotton, that hemp has always been more expensive. Also, the technology behind it, we've had, it's been outlawed since the late 1930s. So the technology is, let's see, 70, it's like 90 years behind. So that kind of has to catch up.
Yeah, I said that was one of the worst things I could have ever did.
Yep. Oh, yeah, exactly.
They should have looked at how well the prohibition of alcohol went and seen the big failure there, and that, it's kind of similar if you look at it.
Yeah, it was, they had, when they outlawed it, a lot of people think that there was some conspiracy with, petroleum industry, the paper industry, but actually, I actually haven't really run into that. I demonize something, when you demonize hemp, then you can justify keeping it illegal, you can justify, having police and the whole prohibition apparatus in place. And, it's kind of, you create jobs for government employees, so that kind of kept it in place. Mostly when I talk to people today, the only people that are still against it are usually people in law enforcement.
Gotcha. And that's to keep their, like you said, their job security for the illegality status.
They'll say, usually they know, should they think of the children, it's not healthy for children, it's going to hurt the children, and, but usually I believe it's just, they want to keep their job. It's very easy to go after marijuana.
Right.
You've declared war on a plant.
I can't even believe they did it, but yeah. On a plant. There's so many other things that they could have been focused on.
Mm-hmm. And all of that is starting to crumble, but it's not all crumbling at one time. It's like little pieces are falling off here and there.
Right, that's for sure. And so you don't think that there's any link to the illegalization and the wood industry wanting to take over the paper and stuff like that?
No, not really. It was probably more, could they have grown hemp back then and had it used for paper? Yes. But, also that time, there was a lot more, if you go to the 30s, there were a lot more forests around. It's easy to take a plant, like a tree that's already there, and just chop it down and use it for your paper, then have to go grow the hemp, harvest it, and then turn it into paper. So a lot of it was just an economic decision, for them. I think if you were around in the mid-30s and you went to a paper person, I don't think they'd be like, well, we want, we don't want marijuana because it will compete with wood. As far as I found, most of them don't really care where the raw material comes from. They just want to see how cheap can we do it and how efficient is it.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And since they'd taken hemp out, it wasn't able to be grown, so...
Yeah, and if you look at the rhetoric of the 1930s, it's entirely from a drug standpoint. They all of a sudden, remember that in the 1920s, they had alcohol prohibition.
Yeah.
And alcohol prohibition led to a huge bureaucracy of law enforcement that were out there trying to enforce it. Two things happened in the late 20s, 1929, you had the stock market crash that put in the Great Depression, and so there was a lot of financial strain on governments. So a few years later, I think in the very early 30s, they repealed prohibition of alcohol. So you have all of these police departments and people enforcing prohibition where they have to justify their resistance. And it's like all of a sudden, marijuana, which had been around for centuries, all of a sudden that is now the new menace to society.
Because they had to have a replacement.
Yeah, and it would justify, if you look at Harry Anslinger, he was head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, which is a precursor to today's DEA, and, like any government employee, you want your department to get more funding. You want more money coming to you. You want to feel you have more significance. When you look at the newspapers that promoted prohibition, their financial incentive was they wanted to sell more newspapers. So they would run, you can scare people and shock people. More people will read your articles, so they began to put out articles about marijuana that made them, it's like, guy smokes marijuana and he kills his whole family. There was somebody crashed a car and it was found out a week earlier he was smoking marijuana, and they try to conflate the issues.
Right. And we all know that's, well, I've never experienced anything like that around anyone smoking marijuana, so.
Exactly. So, this is kind of, how these things happened, is how I believe. And then once a law is passed, it's hard to undo a law.
Right.
These bureaucracies tend to get their own momentum behind them. There was a resurgence in the 80s. All of a sudden, we have what I call, the drug war's been going on since probably the 20s and 30s, but during the 80s, they had a resurgence. In the 60s, Nixon tried the war on drugs, and then in the 80s, you had Reagan did the war on drugs. But that, think about it, that's no different than, what today when you talk about fentanyl or, every decade there's another drug that's worse than the drugs from, all previously.
Right. The opioid issue is huge. I'm glad that I'm not around anybody like that right now.
All right, any other questions?
No, I don't believe so. Thank you so much for your time today, and I appreciate you so much. You're one of my biggest heroes.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. And go ahead and look up that YouTube video. You'll see it's very informative.
For sure, and thank you so much for the link on that, too.
Yeah, no problem, Stacy. Thank you for the interview.
All right, and you have a wonderful afternoon, and here's to hemp becoming even more number one in the United States.
Yes, exactly. And it's going to happen.
I agree. It definitely will, especially with our support.
Yes. All right. Thank you. You have a good day.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. That was my interview with Lawrence. I so appreciated his time for that.